Today on the Bourbon Bytes podcast, Flaviar is releasing their air travel-themed advent calendar. Kilchoman has a new 11-year-old sherry cask matured Scotch. Plus, we're looking at tons of new American whiskey releases, including bottles from Copperworks, Sagamore, Milam Greene, and of course, the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. Plus, I'm continuing my Bourbon Boos series with a review of Kings Creek Sour Mash Whiskey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bourbon Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Clifton, and this is the week of Thursday, October 16th, 2025. This week, I am continuing my series, Bourbon Boos, where I try whiskeys that have scared me off for far too long, but I gotta give them a try. This week is no exception because we are drinking a bottom shelf store brand from one of the largest big box liquor stores out there. And the lack of information about this whiskey, and not just that, the color alone make me frightened. But we're going to get to that in a bit because we have some whiskey news to get to first. As with pretty much every podcast episode this month, there have been lots of new releases being announced from across the bourbon and spirits industry. I try to summarize as many as I can in one of these podcast episodes without making it too long, but we got a lot to get through today, so I'm going to go ahead and dive right into these. The first one isn't actually a whiskey, but it is a whiskey-themed set. The Flaviar Advent Calendar has been announced for 2025. Now, if you're not familiar, Flaviar is a subscription-based whiskey trial program. I've looked into it before. It's never really been something that I think I would enjoy. I enjoy, exploring spirits on my own, but it is a good way for people to get into, trying different spirits from around the world. Personally, I recommend my Bourbon Terabyte membership on bourbonbytes.com, where I send you custom samples every month and I guide you through those tastings. One, you get to try much better whiskeys than they're providing, no offense. But two, it's just a great way to support the channel. So I just want to throw that plug out there. If you are curious, you can go to bourbonbytes.com, check the Byte Club membership tiers, and see if that's something you're interested in. But yes, they do an annual advent calendar, and this is their 8th year doing it. Inside this calendar are 24 curated 50 milliliter drams from 7 different countries, including the US, Japan, Scotland, Ireland, Finland, China, and France. Now, they say some of these pours can cost upwards of $200 for a full-size bottle. We'll have to take them at their word for that. But these box sets, I will admit, are really cool looking. So it does come with a collectible custom Glencairn. Actually, you get 2 of them in this set. And you get what they call a tasting passport, which allows you to access video content like guided tastings for each of these pours in the set. Not only that, but it includes their black level membership for 12 months, which is a $40 value. And you can pick this up for $270 while supplies last. The cutoff date for orders is November 14th for a guaranteed delivery in December. They give you a few of the pours that are going to be available on this press release. It looks like there's a Bacta Golden Age Blend, Sir Davis American Rye Whiskey, which of course is the Beyonce whiskey, Loch Lomond 12 Year, which is a good whiskey. I do like that one, and Chicken Cock Small Batch Bourbons. Now, these are what they say are some of the highlights. That doesn't mean there's not going to be better whiskeys in there. Now, the theme this year is Flaviar Airlines, or FlaviAIR, as they're branding it. So it kind of takes you on a journey through whiskeys from around the world. So definitely check that out if you're interested in it. If you've done it, let me know what you think. I just feel like maybe there's other ways that I would recommend exploring whiskey. Even if you don't have a large friend group that's into whiskey, you may be better off just grabbing a bottle or 2 every now and then. But this is always a fun thing to do. I would love to do it on the channel just for fun. But yeah, $270 is a bit steep when I don't know what's really in it. And I have too much whiskey around here anyways, so... All right, well, on to some new releases. Just a few things to shout out here. I noticed that Kilchoman is coming out with an 11-year-old Islay Sherry Cask Matured Scotch. This one is going to be released at 50% ABV. It's 100% Islay Sherry Cask Matured and was distilled from 2011, 2012, and 2013 barley harvests, aged for a minimum of 11 years in ex-Oloroso sherry casks. It is a limited edition that is available now in the UK and Europe, but it's going to reach beyond that eventually. As with other Kilchomans, this one is no added color or chill filtration. It is a combination of 16 individually selected first fill Oloroso sherry butts. So definitely a big fan of Kilchoman, and I don't think I've seen many age-dated products from them, at least in their regular lineup. So definitely interested in checking this one out. Now, in the world of American whiskey, there are some new releases coming out soon, including a Pinhook collaboration series rye whiskey. This is the fourth edition in their series. This was a collaboration with a New Orleans restaurateur named Neil Bodenheimer. He is the owner of the James Beard Award-winning restaurant Cure. And this was part of a tasting event called Tales of the Cocktail. It was a live blending session and comes in at 6 years old and cask strength. This one will retail for $79.99 and will be available at select retailers nationwide. I had a chance to try one of the collaboration series in the past. It was a Star Wars collaboration and really, really loved that one. I went to a Pinhook tasting here in Southern California probably about a month or two ago and had a chance to try that and other releases and just was really impressed with what they're putting out in these series. So this one sounds really great. I love a good rye whiskey. Like I said, it's blended, minimum 6 years old, but there's probably quite a bit of older rye whiskey in there as well. So if you get a chance to try this, let me know how it is. Now, here's an interesting one coming out of Texas. This is the brand Milam Greene. They have a new Guadalupe Bass Bourbon. This is a collector's edition crafted from 3 7-year-old barrel-strength bourbons. It is part of the coveted Wildlife Collection, and each whiskey release explores how climate shapes whiskey character. Now, the Guadalupe Bass is the official state fish of Texas, and they say this release is a commitment to both innovation in whiskey making and dedication to preserving the state's natural heritage. Now remember, the Guadalupe River is the one that flooded in Texas earlier this year, caused some devastation around the area, not just for people, but for wildlife. And it's great to see that they are paying tribute to that. A portion of the proceeds from this will benefit the Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation, which supports conservation across the state. But let's talk more about the whiskey. So this one was distilled in Kentucky with a mash bill of 60% corn, 36% rye, and 4% malted barley, and was aged in both Kentucky and Texas. And it's going to be bottled at 125.1 proof, so up there in proof. Now, what's interesting is this mash bill is a MGP mash bill. It's their 36% rye mash bill. But according to this article on fredminnick.com, it is a Kentucky bourbon. So don't know if that's just a typo or if this is just a Kentucky distillery that's doing that MGP mash bill. But interesting note there. There's a quote from their director of distillery operations, Rick Monroe, who says, "With its high rye content, this bourbon offers both spice and balance, thanks to the interplay of barrels aged under Texas's intense heat and those with the more classic Kentucky profile." So again, I mentioned of Kentucky. That's really interesting to see that mash bill in reference to Kentucky. I'm looking at the bottle here. It just says straight bourbon whiskey. It doesn't say Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. So again, I don't know if this is just a typo or if this is indeed a non-traditional mash bill for Kentucky. Now, retail of this is going to be $149.99. It's going to be available on the Milam Greene website as well as distillery pickup. There will only be 454 bottles of this available. They say previous releases in this series have sold out within minutes. So if you're interested, definitely look into getting that. I don't see necessarily when this is going to go live, but make sure to follow them on their website to see when that's going to be available. Sounds like a fantastic pour. Now, to keep the whiskey news rolling, there are 2 new announcements from Sagamore. They actually are introducing their brand new master distiller, Ryan Norwood. He's been on the team since 2016, but he has since risen to the role of master distiller. And with that, they're going to be rolling out a 10-year-old straight rye whiskey. As far as I'm aware, this is the oldest spirit coming out of Sagamore, which is super exciting. It's going to be bottled at 55.4%. Ryan says that this release reflects not only our deep commitment to the legacy of Maryland rye, but also the high standards our fans expect. It's a bottle not to be missed. This one's going to come in at $79.99, which is a very fair price for a rye whiskey, especially at that high of proof. They say it's going to be available at the distillery in Baltimore, but a few select premium retailers nationwide. They say it is a limited edition release and it won't last long, and I can imagine that. So I will be absolutely seeking out a bottle of that. I love some older rye whiskeys. Some of my favorites come in around the 10-year age statement. So that's one that I definitely want to seek out, especially for that price. That's one of the better values in older rye whiskey. Now, there's another distillery that I've been talking a lot about, mainly because I just visited their distillery as well as featured them on my channel. Copperworks Distilling out of Seattle has just announced an 11-year-old whiskey coming from their special release series. This one's going to be drawn from a single cask, the second cask they ever filled back in 2014. There'll be less than 200 bottles of it available, but it's going to be their oldest whiskey ever released. This was distilled from pale malted barley sourced from Great Western Malting and matured for over 11 years in a Char No. 3 New American Oak cask from Independent Stave Company. If you saw my live stream with them, you know they really care about these malts they're using for this American malt whiskey. They're really brewers become distillers. They have a fascination with the craft beer scene and have since turned that into a fascination with malted American whiskey. So 11 years old, that's pretty crazy. I wish I would have had a chance to try this when I was at the distillery, but if I was in town, I would absolutely pay up for a pour of this. Like I said, less than 200 bottles. It's going to be bottled at 52% ABV or 104 proof and available for $199.99, which compared to the pricing of their other products, that's pretty much on par with that, especially with it being such a limited release. This is available now for pre-order, and they expect it to ship around November 14th. So if you are interested, go to their website and act fast because, like I said, only 200 bottles available. All right, not to bury the lead, but there's one other big whiskey announcement that we got to talk about because everyone's talking about it, right? The Buffalo Trace Antique Collection has just announced their full lineup for 2025. And it's going to be the first time ever that there's going to be a Colonel E.H. Taylor bottled in bond bourbon included. It looks like it has a yellow foil around the top of the bottle to make it stand out compared to the others. And the chances of seeing it are probably just as slim as the rest of them, if not more, because it's the first time it's coming out. So this one is going to be aged 15 years and 4 months and bottled at 100 proof, which of course is the bottled in bond standard. That's pretty crazy for a 15-year-old bottled in bond product. I don't think I've ever seen anything that old that fits that requirement. They say this is crafted from their sour mash recipe, and the bottle features E.H. Taylor's signature logo. So it is different because, you know, every bottle of E.H. Taylor kind of looks the same. So this is the first time doing a bit of a rebranding sort of thing with it. I think it looks nice. I think it fits in with the collection. I don't think it, looks that different than the other BTAC bottles, but it is something cool to see added this year. Now we also have the other bottles in the lineup, which are just as exciting, if not more exciting. Eagle Rare 17 years old comes in at 101 proof. This one was matured for 18 years and 4 months, so it's even older than the age statement leads on. I remember last year the Eagle Rare was a lot of people's favorite, so definitely keeping my eye on that one this year. Now, of course, there's a new release of George T. Stagg. This one's coming in at 15 years and 4 months. Interestingly enough, the same age statement as the E.H. Taylor bottled in bond bourbon. Not quite sure why they went with that. I've seen some debate online, like, is this the same, whiskey that they're starting with as the source? And then the Stagg is being released at cask strength. I don't know. They haven't really commented on it as far as I'm aware. But this one is going to be one of the strongest releases ever because it's going to be bottled at 142.8 proof. So yes, we are getting another hazmat George T. Stagg, which is very exciting. I had an opportunity to try the last hazmat release and was blown away by how delicious that was. Huge shout out to Chris and Lil from Australia who allowed me a chance to try that. And of course, we have our 2 rye whiskeys that are included in the antique collection. Sazerac 18-year-old, which this year is a 18-year, 5-month rye whiskey bottled at 90 proof. And Thomas H. Handy rye whiskey, which is aged over 6 years and bottled at 129.8 proof, which is an increase in proof from last year's release. Honestly, the Sazerac 18 is the only Buffalo Trace Antique Collection bottle that I've never had a chance to try. I love the Thomas H. Handy releases, but those are usually younger and higher proof. I think I would like to try something older and lower proof just to kind of do the contrast there. So if anyone has a sample of any of the previous or this year's releases of Sazerac 18, I'd love to try it. I'm happy to swap a Thomas H. Handy sample with you so to see how those compare. And last but not least, one of my favorite parts of the antique collection, William LaRue Weller Kentucky Straight Bourbon. And this one is going to be released at 129 proof and aged for 14 years. Oh, that just sounds so amazing. Like I said, this one's one of my favorite. This is a wheated bourbon, but a very nicely aged, high proof wheated bourbon. Always one of the standouts for me as well. So I will be hunting for the antique collection this year, as with all years. Will I get a chance to try all of them? Most definitely not. Will I get a chance to try maybe 1 or 2 of them? We'll see. I'm always on the lookout this time of year for lotteries and limited edition drops in my area. And especially this year, because like I said, I'm dedicating this year of the podcast and the YouTube channel to buying things that I wouldn't normally buy, but think that are worth reviewing here on the platform. Speaking of which, we got to get into our Bourbon Boos Byte-Sized review. All right, well, unlike the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, I am not excited for this week's bite-sized review. As I mentioned last week, I'm going to be reviewing whiskeys that have scared me for far too long, but I'm going to give them a shot and give them a fair chance at a legit review here on the channel. Last week, of course, I did the dough ball cookie dough whiskey, which is a little more of a joke, but this time I kind of wanted to try something that I didn't expect to like, but wanted to give it a fair shot, and it's a legit whiskey. Now, legit is, I hesitate to say legit because, well, there's a few things, but I'll get into that in a second. This is Kings Creek Tennessee Sour Mash Whiskey. This is their black label product. It's aged for 4 years, bottled at 80 proof, and has been through the Lincoln County process where it's been charcoal mellowed. Now, in terms of information, that's about where it ends. So what's funny is the side of this bottle says that it was bottled by Universal Brands out of Princeton, Minnesota, which, after doing some digging, doesn't lead me to too much information. This was created as a white label whiskey product for store brands like Total Wine at a place called the USDP, which is the United States Distilled Products Company. Now, like I said, not only do they create their own brands, but they also produce whiskeys like this for big box retailers. But what's interesting is this is labeled as a Tennessee whiskey. So my guess is this manufacturer of spirits sourced this non-disclosed Tennessee whiskey and bottled it themselves. We don't know where this is from. We can only just assume it's from one of the larger contract distillers out of Tennessee. Now, pricing-wise, this is a bottom shelf pour. This is a $16.49 per 750 milliliter bottle. You can also get a handle for $32 if that's more your jam. But let's see what this is all about. This week on my live stream, I'm going to be trying a bunch of other Total Wine branded whiskeys. So I thought, why not also bring it over to the podcast here for my Bourbon Boos series? Now, there's a chance this could be from George Dickel, which is not known to be one of my favorite distilleries, but one that does produce a lot of Tennessee whiskey. There's also a few producers that aren't, making their house labels. I think one was literally called Tennessee Distilling Company, if I remember correctly. But yeah, no idea where this is from. So not sure if I mentioned it, but this is a sour mash whiskey, which is just part of the process of their fermentation. Not sure if that gives us any clues as to where it's made, but a lot of Tennessee whiskey is sour mash, so it kind of aligns with that, going for that Jack Daniels-esque, flavor profile, I guess. Speaking of which, it's pretty obvious this label was inspired by Jack Daniels, although the bottle shape is not like a typical Jack ripoff. It's more of a flask-shaped bottle. All right, let's give this Kings Creek Black Label a nose. All right, well, very, very sweet. It kind of is a very heavily creamed corn sweetness for sure on the nose. Now, as with bourbons, Tennessee whiskeys need to be at least 51% corn. We don't know the mash bill of this one, but I'm guessing there's probably quite a bit more corn in that. Really, really sweet, though. Almost, and I was almost going to say banana, but I feel like maybe I'm just being influenced by the fact that it's similar to a Jack Daniels. If there is banana, it's very, very slight. It's almost like a banana pudding, but like not a homemade one, like a store-bought like vanilla wafer, like super sweet processed banana pudding, but very, very light with the banana notes. Definitely more vanilla, sweet corn. Honestly, not complex, but not bad. Let's go for a taste. Cheers. Okay. Yeah. That's very different. Not what I expected. It has a bit of a sour thing going on here. It goes a very different direction than the nose, at least on first sip. It almost is reminds me as if something has gone off here, which I know it hasn't because, it's just whiskey. Whiskey doesn't really go bad. But that was a bit of an unpleasant kind of first impression here. Let me give it a second sip because that caught me off guard. Let's go again. Yeah, it's got a little bit of a melted plastic kind of thing going on. And I was saying sour at first because it's so contrasting to the sweetness that this thing gave me on the nose. It goes back sweet on the end of the palate, but finish wise, it disappears just as quickly as it arrived. It really does not stick around at all. Probably one of the shortest finishes I've ever had on a whiskey that I've reviewed on this channel. There's still a bit of banana, and instead of banana pudding, it's a little bit more of a banana bread, but again, not a really decadent banana bread, just more of a banana Twinkie, if that's a thing. Just very overly processed, yeah, I mean, that's a tough palate to describe. I don't think I've ever given Twinkie as a note before. And you know what? I don't mind Twinkies, but this one is not my jam. It's just a little bit more of like a overprocessed kind of like vanilla cake, just like way too sweet. That corn's still there, and as much as I would like to say that it's helping it, it's not. It's just coming across more of like a generic sweetness at this point. I was hoping for maybe a little bit of like a cornbread or something like that, but it really doesn't go that direction at all. It doesn't really go any direction. I mean, even compared to like 100% corn whiskey, like mellow corn, I mean, this lacks the character that something like that would have. It just really falls flat. Best case scenario for a whiskey like this, I think, is maybe just to kind of down a shot, like a little bit of pre-gaming, because this one isn't one that I want to sit on and enjoy pretty much ever. I know it sounds like I'm being harsh, but listen, I have no problem with bottom shelf whiskeys and bourbons. I drink a lot of them. One of my favorites is Evan Williams, even just the black label. I think similar price to this, but a lot more character. If I'm going to splurge a little bit, I'll get an Evan Williams white label or single barrel. I'm also a huge fan of Wild Turkey 101, which is also another, not quite bottom shelf, but near bottom shelf pour. So I wanted to give this a shot, and I really didn't go into it expecting much. How much cheaper is it than Jack Daniel's? That's what I want to know. So like I said, a 750 milliliter bottle of this is $16.49. At Total Wine, Jack Daniel's Black Label is $17.99. So for $1.50 more, you can get a well-known, trusted household name Tennessee Sour Mash whiskey. I'm not like someone that seeks out, brand names by any means. But when it comes to whiskey, I think saving money isn't always better, because the more you spend, likely the better whiskey you're going to get in some cases. Now, of course, that doesn't always apply. But in this case of Kings Creek Tennessee Sour Mash whiskey, yeah, it's definitely not good. I'll just say it outright. It's not good. It's nowhere near as good as Jack Daniel's, even just the black label. I was sipping on some of the Jack Daniel's Bonded right before this, which is also a 4-year age-dated product, of course at 100 proof, and a little bit more pricey, but the flavor of that knocked this out of the park so much. So yeah, this Kings Creek, to give it a rating, which, I have to do, out of 10, I would probably give this a 2.5 out of 10. Like, that's really bad, but like, there's nothing really going for it. Like, the nose was the only thing that I thought was relatively decent, but even that was, not great. I'll have one last sip of it just to maybe lock that in. You know what? I'll bump it up a bit. I'll bump it up to a 3 only because it doesn't make me immediately want to spit it out. Like, it's not bad necessarily. It does have that kind of a weird sour kind of plasticky note, but that's kind of what you expect with a lot of bottom shelf pours. So I'll give it a 3 out of 10 just because I didn't immediately spit it out of my mouth. But this is an absolute pass for me. I think, even Jack Daniel's Black Label, which is not one of my favorite whiskeys ever, is far superior than Kings Creek Tennessee whiskey. So thank you guys for humoring me and letting me do this review. Listen, I love reviewing whiskeys in all categories. It's not always about the limited editions or allocated releases. Sometimes it's about just your everyday pours. And, a lot of you guys I know aren't going out seeking the BTACs or the Pappies, although I'm sure a lot of you are. You just want something good to sip on and have a great time with. And this Kings Creek is not that. So that's about it for this week's episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you have any suggestions for whiskey to do for next week, Bourbon Boos, let me know. Like I said, this Thursday night, I'm doing a live stream on YouTube where I'm going to be comparing other Total Wine house brand bourbons and whiskeys. Should be a good time. If you're not yet following me on YouTube, youtube.com/bourbonbytes. You can also follow me at bourbonbytes.com, my home for everything on the web. But until next time, this has been the Bourbon Bites Podcast, a whiskey podcast with a gaming twist. Cheers, and I'll talk to you guys next episode.